Welcome to Voices Unheard, a podcast by the Childbright Network, where we have honest conversations with the people whose voices need to be heard in child healthcare and research. That includes youth with lived and living experience of disability, parent research partners, health researchers, clinicians, and many others. This series is produced by the Childbright Network, the pan-Canadian research network working to create brighter futures for children and youth with brain-based developmental disabilities and their families through patient-oriented research.
Trust is built through a reciprocal relationship where both researchers and youth contribute to the process and are willing to learn and grow.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Childbright National Youth Advocacy Council, also known as NYAC, episode of Voices Unheard podcast, From Tokenism to Trust, Engaging Youth with Disabilities in Research. In this episode, we cover our lived and living experiences with what counts as meaningful engagement with youth, followed by an enlightening conversation with researcher Linda Nguyen, who discusses her experiences of trust building with her youth research partners or patient partners. We conclude this episode with our final thoughts, reflecting on the insights provided by Linda, and leave you to share your thoughts and responses in the comments on this episode. We are your hosts, Claire, Kelsey, and Logan, and we are members of the NYAC.
My name is Logan, and I'm one of the chairs of Childbright NYAC, and I've been a member since 2018, and I'm from Ontario.
My name is Kelsey. I have been a member of Childbright's NYAC since March 2023.
Everyone, my name is Claire, and I've been a member of the NYAC since January of 2021, and I'm currently based out of Nova Scotia. In this episode, we delve into what it truly means to engage youth in research, particularly those with brain-based developmental disabilities. This conversation is about moving beyond surface-level involvement and into genuine partnership. It's about listening, co-creating, and recognizing that youth bring more than just stories. At the heart of meaningful engagement is trust. Trust is about more than being included in a project or invited to a meeting. It means feeling heard beyond the disability you bring to the table. It means being recognized and appreciated for your full experience, not just your diagnosis. Trust is built through a reciprocal relationship where both researchers and youth contribute to the process and are willing to learn and grow. When researchers only focus on disability, it can feel tokenistic.
Given that this episode is titled From Tokenism to Trust, we think it's important to define what tokenism is. Tokenism is when you only include underrepresented communities to create the appearance of inclusion and inclusive practices, without making sure the communities have meaningful support and opportunities. The opposite of tokenism is when researchers take the time to understand us as whole people, seeing the intersectionality of who we are as individuals. This is where meaningful collaboration becomes possible. For those who don't know, intersectionality is a feminist theory which analyzes various forms of oppression and hierarchies of power and identities. Intersectionality considers a range of socio-demographic factors and examines how they might interact together and at the same time. This theory highlights the power relationships among various groups.
Yeah, youth with disabilities are never just one thing. We have layered identities, experiences, and perspectives. Before we introduce our guest today, we would like to take a moment to share our own experiences. Each of us has engaged with research in different ways, and we want to reflect on what it has meant to be included in or excluded from those spaces.
As a young adult with cerebral palsy, trust is essential when partnering with youth with lived experience. Often when partnering, youth are not sure where to start or may feel intimidated, thinking that they may not have anything valuable to offer. In my experience, asking questions is essential to ensure your voice is heard and that your opinions matter. I also think choosing your level of involvement is necessary. One may feel more comfortable analyzing data than disseminating the data, for example. What primarily interested me in engaging with youth in research was to share my experiences with others, spread awareness, and help not only the patient community, but communities in general. An example of a project that changed the direction or improved because of youth involvement would be the Youth Group for Mental Health Policy Making Guide. This guide brings together knowledge, experiences, and ideas to make mental health policy making more inclusive and accessible for young people. It was created by a diverse group of 45 young people from across Canada, working with researchers and adult allies. What makes it special is that these young people shape the guide themselves. designing workshops, sharing their lived experiences, and helping ensure participation is meaningful, accessible, and flexible for everyone involved.
As a young adult with cerebral palsy, autism spectrum disorder, and multiple anxiety disorders, including generalized anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, trust in any relationship is important, especially for youth like myself that live with multiple intersecting identities. I always feel the most comfortable when there is an investment from the researchers and members in getting to know me or anyone else on the team beyond the specific narrow role that I have on their project. Learning about what are my goals, what are my aspirations, and what are my skills, and how they can best support. I encourage all engagements involving youth to strive for partnerships that sees each person on the team from a holistic perspective by learning who they are as individuals, both personally and professionally, and how you as a research team can learn what they want to get out of the partnership experience. What interests me most about engaging in youth research is the advocacy part of it, and how I best explain advocacy and how we do it on the council is to advocate for better youth engagement, including people with disabilities, by continuing to have noticeable and significant presence within the network as the group to go to when researchers want to understand how to engage with youth with lived experience. I want the council to continue to embody what the Child Right Network stands for in terms of centering the voices of people with lived experience in all aspects of the work to advance research within the field of neurodevelopmental disability.
As a young adult with multiple rare diseases and a neuromuscular disorder, researching with the NYAC has both benefited me as a patient and helped me to develop my skills as a young researcher. During my time in the NYAC, I went from not really understanding what research really meant to leading my own patient-oriented research, recognizing the importance of the value that lived experience brings to shaping not only what is being researched, but also ensuring that it is done in a way that aligns with the values and priorities of those that will ultimately be benefiting from its outputs. Having researchers who are willing to see youth as not only someone with lived experience, but also as budding researchers themselves is extremely empowering. Having myself been involved with many projects from my early adolescence to now as a new medical resident, I have seen just how impactful building these relationships can be. I am most excited in the future to see continued partnership building and mentorship between new youth researchers within the NYAC and throughout the Child Right organization. One example I can think of when this was done right was during the Ready or Not Brain-Based Disabilities app development. This was a project that was created through the Child Right organization that involved the creation of a gamified application to help youth transition from pediatric to adult healthcare. And from the inception of the idea on how they wanted to do this, there was youth involved from day one throughout the entire randomized controlled trial up until the publication of the data and further in the presentation of all of the research going forward. And I think that that was such an empowering opportunity for me. And the fact that they were able to have youth involved in every step and also having multiple avenues for further personal development was such an awesome opportunity to be involved in. For those of you who don't know, a randomized controlled trial is essentially a kind of study in which people are divided into two different groups, one of which is the people who are doing the new intervention that's being studied, and one of them are just receiving what is considered standard of practice at that time. So for this project, the people who were in the intervention group or the people who were doing the new part of the study are those who received the application. And then the other ones were just going along with the standard of care of what would normally be done for transitions from pediatric to adult healthcare. And then at the end of the day, you essentially run some fancy statistics on whether or not the intervention that you proposed, the application, had actual benefits for these youth.
Okay, a project where I feel youth engagement has been done well is the Advancing Equity in Childhood Disability Research project, which was funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council Shirk Insight Development Grant. This project focuses on improving partnerships between research teams and youth and children. One of our study findings has been trust and other aspects of relationship building. This project has now been extended to me leading the development of training modules funded by Child Rights Training and Innovation Fund as an extension of the Advancing Equity study.
Thank you for listening to our stories. We are excited to welcome our guests and discuss more in depth the partnerships and including youth with disabilities in research. Today, we are joined by Linda Nguyen, a researcher in child and youth health and disabilities. We invited them to join us to talk about what youth engagement looks like in practice, how to build trust with young people, and how youth with brain-based developmental disabilities can shape research in powerful ways. Please welcome Linda to the Voices Unheard podcast. Linda, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Kelsey, for having me here today. My name is Linda Nguyen. I'm currently an Israeli accelerator assistant professor in the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Calgary. My research has always been focused on how to work in partnership to support siblings as well as youth with disabilities, and also how to translate research into policies and practices. Thank you so much for having me here today.
So, Linda, can you start by telling how you got into working with youth and why youth perspectives are valuable in health research?
Thanks, Kelsey. Your question made me really reflect about how it's been the whole journey of how I started working with youth, and also not just youth with disabilities, but also siblings. So I actually started first with working with siblings who are youth and young adults. It started at a time where I first had conversations with two siblings who have lived and living experiences of having a sibling with a disability in the family. I started by having conversations with them actually at a cafe over coffee and tea. And at the end of our conversation, and they were so passionate about sharing their stories, I asked if they wanted to partner with me in research. And that's how the Sibling Youth Advisory Council, also known as the SIBYAC, was formed in 2018. And we've been partnering over the past few years, almost 6 or 7 years now. Since then, I also had the opportunity to supervise a youth partner, an undergraduate student at the time, Sunny Dong, on a project. And this was a project that came from the needs of youth advisors from an organization known as CPNet through the Ontario Brain Institute. And so through this project that I was co-supervising, what we found were the youth advisors identified that there is a family engagement and research course offered by Ken Child and McMaster University. And in 2023, 4 of the youth co-investigators from our team took the Family Engagement Research, or FER course, and shared what they liked and ways to improve the course. Since then, in 2024, we received the CIHR Healthy Youth Catalyst Grant, which offered youth cohorts of the FER course. One of our co-instructors of the FER youth cohort is Logan, who's also here today. And our aim is so we can co-create a youth engagement and research course in the future. Over time, I've also worked on several other projects engaging with youth, because I think the youth perspectives are so important to understand and identify that the research projects really comes from the lived and living experiences. For example, I worked with Claire on the Child Ready or Not Brain-Based Disabilities project, and we co-authored a commentary paper about policy recommendations to support youth transitioning from pediatric to adult health care. I've also worked on a critical ethical engagement on youth guidelines on how to ethically engage with youth. And also most recently, which I think was super exciting, was I co-presented with 2 youth partners at an international conference in Germany. And that was really exciting for me to see over time my journey of different ways and opportunities to engage with youth.
I'd say are some misconceptions researchers might have about working with youth with brain-based disabilities?
That's a really great question. And I think that one of the misconceptions for researchers is to really remember that there is no one-size-fits-all, but there are guidelines and recommendations. For example, I remember the partnership with the National Youth Advocacy Council and the Sibling Youth Advisory Council on tips for researchers. Again, there's so many studies as well as information and experiences being shared out there among researchers and youth about experiences with partnering together. But at the end of the day, these are only suggestions. It's so important to take the time to get to know youth themselves And for youth, they will also have different levels of experience with engagement. So also remembering not to make assumptions. Just because certain strategies might have worked with one group doesn't necessarily mean that it will work with another group. And so it's important to have time to get to know the team and partners, have time for ongoing reflections, and then also to have these conversations among team members and partners about what their goals, expectations, and learning needs might be.
Thanks for the insightful response, Linda. Can you share an example of a project that changed direction or improved because youth were meaningfully involved?
One of the things that changed from partnering with youth was one of my first studies was engaging with siblings who have lived and living experiences through the NYAC. And originally I proposed to conduct an intervention study. I wanted to really go in and design this whole intervention study on how to support youth. And it was through the perspectives of the Sibling Youth Advisory Council that my sibling partners asked me, do we really know what the needs of the experiences of siblings are? And so that's when my team and we took a step back to think about how to conduct reviews to see what is in the published literature, as well as a qualitative study to understand the perspectives of siblings and to identify potential needs and resources they might like to have. And it's actually through the program of research that I've worked together with the NYAC that now we are working on co-developing a siblings training, empowerment, and advocacy kit, or siblings T-kit. So as you can see, it really took time, and I want to make sure that I incorporated the experiences of sibling partners that better understand what the needs of the sibling community was. Actually, since then, what has improved is how I've been reflecting on the engagement of what I do and partner with youth, siblings, as well as other partners as well. So I've started to change practices and my own research approach. For example, I often think about what this partnership mean and what do youth partners want to get out of the research project. Is really a bi-directional and relational approach where we can both create a partnership that is meaningful to both of us. For example, I want to make sure that the projects I've worked on, there are opportunities where youth can really steer the directions of a project. For example, as I mentioned before, the youth engagement and research project, where we want to adapt the family engagement and research course into a youth engagement research course. I have youth co-principal investigators working alongside me. This was a role that they really wanted to have, and we've been working really in partnership and true co-leadership together, where we make all the team decisions together. And that's where I think my practices have changed and how I want to have conversations with youth partners about the roles that they would like to have in the partnership.
This is our last question. So what advice would you give to researchers trying to move beyond tokenism?
I think my biggest advice as I reflect on this question is to start early with having conversations. I always think about how there's always so many competing deadlines that has to be met, whether it's project deadlines or grant deadlines, but how to have ongoing conversations with youth and consider ways to build a network with partnerships. And if you don't already have youth partners working on research projects that a researcher might be thinking about or consider conducting, reaching out to youth partners already established through network. Often tell among my research colleagues around the NYAC consultation service, also share webinars or accessing resources that are available. There are already a lot of resources that researchers can access, for example, the engagement in research or FER course, other tools such as the involvement matrix to discuss roles and responsibilities that partners may have, as well as the strengths, skills, and goals matrix that allows youth to have conversations and share their strengths as well as any goals they have around different skills they may want to have. I think my biggest advice is really building a time for conversations and getting to know youth. Even just last week, I was having conversations with my colleagues and we were reflecting about how it's so important to have those casual conversations where there's no hidden agenda. I didn't think about when I first started partnering with the Sibling Youth Advisory Council. We just had a chat over coffee and tea and for them to share their experiences. I also share my own personal experiences and stories, and to have those conversations in a casual environment is so important to get to know each other and to develop rapport and a true partnership. And I think it's coming out of those stories and opportunities for conversations that the natural part of research will come into play.
So this brings us to the end of the conversation. We want to give a huge thank you to Linda Nguyen for joining us and sharing their experiences and insights. Today we heard that real youth engagement is about more than just asking for feedback or checking a box. It's about listening deeply, building relationships over time, and making space for youth to be leaders in the research process. When youth with disabilities are meaningfully included, research becomes more inclusive, more relevant, and powerful.
Thank you for this insightful conversation, highlighting the essential components of getting to know research partners beyond proposed projects illustrates the importance of supporting youth as partners and ensuring their voices and needs are heard. I believe taking a step back to reflect on the population you engage with is crucial to advancing community change.
Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, I feel like taking it back to tokenism, I think Linda had a really good response in terms of the multiple ways that she engages with her youth research partners. To just like as an example, she mentioned that she meets people for coffee and has casual conversation instead of it just being about research and it just being about the partnership. She sees the whole person beyond the engagement, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I totally agree, Logan. And having, worked with a number of researchers and having worked with Linda as one of her students in the past, I think that there's definitely a piece to working with individuals with lived experiences and particularly youth with lived experiences in research where it can be so impactful to form that human connection with them. And I think that's kind of my biggest piece of advice for researchers when they're looking at working with like this group of people. Is that it's so important to be able to build those interpersonal relationships as well as a professional one, because it can be super intimidating going into the space as a young person, especially if you're not super well versed in the world of research. It can be really intimidating to be meeting with all of these doctors or PhDs, and having that person who's kind of that lifeline for you in the project can be really impactful. I don't know if we want to say anything beyond that, but
I mean, I don't really feel like re-echoing what I just said because that would be my response.
No, that's totally fair.
Like I was literally just gonna echo like it's important to see the person as a whole person. I'm not gonna reiterate, right?
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to say about that other than the fact that we know that Linda does this very well, and that's why she was on the podcast. And we hope that other researchers take away from this podcast what we've learned from Linda and what Linda has learned from us.
We hope this episode inspires more researchers to think critically about how they engage with youth who have disabilities and to take steps toward creating more inclusive and trusting research environment. If you would like to learn more about the National Youth Advocacy Council or access resources related to this topic, please check the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
You have been listening to Voices Unheard, brought to you by the Child Right Network. Thank you to our guests for sharing their experiences, and to you for listening to their stories. To learn more about Child Right and the National Youth Advocacy Council and how we're working toward more inclusive child healthcare and health research, visit childright.ca. That's www.child-bright.ca. Until next time, keep listening, keep imagining, and keep working together towards brighter futures.